So we have an impressive lineup today, and we'll also be calling on the audience and asking for participation, just because in the room we have people ranging from organizations such as Facebook and Marines to the Navy, NASA, the Department of Health and Human Services. So we're going to try and extract some of the value from the people in the audience. The format we're going to go through here is we'll do kind of 20 to 30 minute lectures or sessions, and then we're going to bring up the entire, the 2 or 3 people from that module, and we'll do sort of a panel Q&A. I think it's most efficient that way, and that way we can guarantee that we get through all the speakers in our allotted amount of time. So first off, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Scott Galloway. I'm a clinical associate professor at NYU Stern School of Business. Was a colleague there with Doug for many years, and work for a think tank called L2. We focus on digital innovation across industry verticals, prestige industry, pharma, auto. And most recently, we did a study looking at the digital competence of public sector organizations. And how many of you have read the report or seen it? It's good. Sort of a catalyst for us about this event. And our feeling is that digital competence really is the driver of stakeholder value, and understanding or being able to measure where your competence relative to your peer group is key in terms of allocating finite resources to its greatest return. So our objective for today, and this is how you hold us accountable for your investment in time and treasure here, is to better understand the intersection of social media and public sector organizations. I think there's a general recognition that these emerging platforms are going to play a key role and an increasingly important role in these organizations. But the second step is, as a manager, is okay, now what? Most of you are managers or students, or students who want to become managers. And at the end of the day, as Peter Drucker said, the only thing a manager is charged with, the only thing they're really supposed to do or have to do, is to figure out how to allocate capital to its greatest return. When we say capital, we don't just mean financial capital, but creative capital, intellectual capital, how much time you spend on various initiatives within your organizations. So some of our speakers today, we just heard from the dean. We're going to hear from scholars, private sector, people from the private sector, best-of-breed vendors. We'll be doing best practices at the end of the day with my colleague, Maureen Mullen. But as you can see, we have an interesting cross-section of everyone from Blue State Digital to the Nature Conservancy to NASA, who came in at #1. Let me just start off with NASA. No one has been, we've done this for 700 organizations. We cover 340 data points across 5 dimensions. Each of our studies takes about 1,200 hours to collect just the data. And everyone was so excited that NASA came in #1. It was such an inspirational, or just, it was so, everyone felt so good about NASA. And it would make a lot of sense that you can see this organization that pioneered this one medium space is especially agile and deft at working in another medium. And so, and of course, the moment the report came out, the commander of the space station immediately tweeted our report, which we thought was indicative from space, which we thought was indicative of their competence. So, let's get started. Here are some of the, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the macro shifts within media and the economy that are created rise or setting the stage for some of the shift that we're going to talk about today. The first one, as it relates to media, is that corporations are lagging the consumer, organizations are lagging the consumer. The green chart, or the green bar, is the percentage of media that's consumed through that channel. So if you look at newspapers, approximately 7% of our media is consumed through newspapers, of a pie of 100%. Yet corporate America is allocating 20% of its media dollars to spend to newspapers. This is a very bad forward-looking indicator for the shareholders of newspaper companies. Because ultimately, over time, those numbers should come into some sort of equilibrium, right? Whereas if you look at the internet, over a quarter of our media is now consumed via the internet, reading, going to NewYorkTimes.com, watching TV online, etc. But only 12% of budgets are allocated to the purchase of online media. These numbers are misleading. This number, if you're under the age of 40, is actually 40%. If you're under the age of 40 and your household income is over $50,000, that number is actually 50%. So probably the most powerful cohort in terms of corporate America, in terms of looking into where the future of spending power and influence over half their media consumption is now taking place online. Yet corporate America is allocating less than an eighth. And it goes industry by industry. The industry we spend a lot of time in, the prestige industry, actually only allocates 4% of their budget to online media. And I would argue that number is probably similar for public sector organizations. I'd be surprised if public sector organizations weren't in the low single digits in terms of the actual capital they allocate online. So, consumers are turning to digital in terms of finding out information about public sector offerings. About 1 in 7 sign up for email alerts from a government site. 1 in 6 have watched a video. About half look for information around government services. 13% read a blog of a government agency. And about 1 in 20 have followed a government agency on a social network. Which have surprised me. It seems like quite a lot. And then a small but growing number sign up for text messages. Social media is not a U.S. phenomenon. We make the mistake of believing that because Facebook is headquartered in the Bay Area, that we think that social media is a U.S. phenomenon. As a percentage of people who are online, we're actually less social as a marketplace. So the percentage of people who are online in Russia, approximately 85% are on the social network. So if you're wired and you're in another nation, you're more likely to be on a social network than in the U.S. This is, when you're doing presentations like this, all the slides are similar colors and similar size, so they all develop a certain level of sameness with respect to their proportional importance. This is one of the more important slides, at least we're going to present, and it's market share of the internet by domain. So of all time spent online, Yahoo's has 6% market share, meaning that you took all the aggregate time spent on the internet in 2007. Yahoo had a 6% market share. It's now down to 4%. Microsoft was at 4% 3 years ago. It's now down to 25 basis points, or 0.25%. That, again, is a very bad forward-looking indicator for the shareholders of Microsoft. Their share of the internet, if you will, has been cut to 1/16 of where it was just 3 years ago. Look at Google. Google's significant, but it's not as big as you would think, right? Why is that? Why isn't Google as big as you would think? Yeah, Gordon.
You go to Google and move on somewhere else.
You're with the Naval Sea Systems Command. Is that correct? That is a great title. I love that rap. That's got to be a great rap to tell people you work. That sounds so important. What is that? What do you do?
It's we build ships for the Navy.
Build ships for the Navy. Good enough. We're glad you're here. So Google is a great way to save time. It's a search and destroy mechanism, right? I need to get somewhere, I type in something in the search box, it takes me there. Whereas YouTube's a great way to waste time, right? And actually you spend more time on YouTube than people spend on Google itself. Look at Facebook. More people spending more time on Facebook now than any other brand, any other site, any other domain on the internet in the world. And more importantly, what's the most impressive thing about this? Look at the arc. Look at the slope of the growth that way. Facebook is now 10% of all time on the internet. It's got 10% market share. I was on Bloomberg Television 2 nights ago, and the question was, is Facebook really worth $50 billion? Goldman Sachs just announced a private investment that capitalizes and values Facebook at $50 billion. That's a valuation greater than Time Warner, valuation greater than Boeing, greater than Bristol Myers Squibb. I mean, these are some big companies. And the question was, how could this be worth $50 billion? And my thesis is it's actually dramatically undervalued. And that Facebook is going to be the most valuable company in the world in 24 months. And why is that? 10% right now, 10% of the internet. 600 million, 580 million people, doubling in the next 80 months, going to over the next 18 months, going to 1 billion. So that means logically, market share should go from 10% to 20%. That's pretty easy. That's just in the next 24 months. Now imagine, and I realize this is a stretch, but imagine that they continue to innovate around product and their ability to connect with consumers. And we continue to spend more and more time as individuals on Facebook. And let's really think big. Let's assume that people on average double the amount of time they spend every day on Facebook. That takes their market share of the internet to 40%. Now, just for the sake of humoring me, let's figure out that somehow in 3 years, Facebook gets to 51% the share of the internet. And by the way, Facebook's one of those unusual organizations we haven't seen in history, where as it gets bigger, it begins growing faster. It's usually the other way around. The growth slows because of the law of big numbers. So imagine, if you will, that Facebook were to get to 51% of all time spent online. And what you have is, I don't know if any of you are Star Trek fans, but there was this thing called a speculum, where in Star Trek, the Captain Kirk would land on these planets that looked, smelled, and felt like Earth. They were the exact copies of Earth. If Facebook gets to 40 or 50% of the internet, then effectively, Facebook has become the internet. So now imagine if all of a sudden someone was able to incorporate the internet, create an LLC, and have shareholders. What is the internet worth? What would the market capitalization be of the internet right now? Facebook has the opportunity within 36 months to become the de facto speculum, or the mimic copy of the internet. And it's happening. The top 10 websites accounted for a third of all US page views 10 years ago. 5 years ago, it was 50%. Now, the top 10 websites account for 75% of all page views and all traffic online. So what's happening? The web is maturing. Every day, if you're not one of those top 10 websites, and I don't think anybody here is, except for the guy from Facebook, every day it gets more and more expensive and more difficult to drive traffic to your website. Every day. Tomorrow it'll be more expensive to get those uniques to your website. Why? Simply put, people are spending less time at goarmy.gov and they're spending more time on the US Army's Facebook page. People are leaving the internet for social media platforms. There's an entire generation, entire cohort of young people, typically higher income young people, where Facebook has become an operating system. They don't leave Facebook. They do email, they do their work there, their entertainment, they watch videos, they communicate with brands, organizations, and they never leave Facebook all day. So I'll go back to this for a second. As a manager, this has significant implications. You're going to be taking, just as everyone's sort of coming to the conclusion that they need to take resources out of their terrestrial or offline efforts and put them into their online efforts, you're going to see an ensuing reallocation of human capital out of your website development efforts into your social media development efforts. So the digital team that works for Doug is going to be spending a lot more time thinking about George Washington School of Business's Facebook page, their Twitter account, their YouTube channel, their blog, and how they all seamlessly create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, as opposed to just being totally focused on GWSB.edu. More people will be surfing the internet from their mobile phones in 30 months than from their desktop or laptop computers. Maybe you've heard this stat. It's one of those stats that's just, you kind of hear it and it doesn't make any sense. It's largely being driven by emerging markets where people are skipping computers. They're going from no computer computing on a handheld or a PDA. Again, this has ramifications around what you're developing for more HTML5, apps, m-commerce, etc. So what does this mean for public sector organizations? There is evidence that the more socially engaged you are, the greater return you have to stakeholders. So this is a study done by the Altimeter Group looking at the top 100 brands. So our thesis is digital IQ has a strong correlation with adding stakeholder value. This begins to support that in the corporate world. We're starting to see some real evidence of this. So this study looked at the least social, wallflowers, to the most social, mavens, in terms of how many platforms they're on and how robust that participation was on those platforms. And then it looked at revenue growth, margin growth, and net margin growth. And what it found is there's a pretty significant correlation between revenues and profits and companies that are least social and most social. So you're starting to see a connection between shareholder return, stakeholder return, how social organizations are. So in our organization, we've actually regressed digital IQ scores to revenue growth. And in the specialty retail study, we looked at about 75 specialty retailers across the U.S., Nordstrom, Abercrombie & Fitch, Macy's, etc. When we looked at the organizations that scored genius in our study, they on average over a 12-month period had grown their revenues by a whopping 40%. Whereas those that came in the feeble category, the lowest category, and this was 08 to 09, so that was a big growth year, right? Because we were in the depths of the receptions for our control year. But the feeble companies had only grown 4%. We've also found there's a pretty tight correlation in year-on-year sales growth in the automobile industry and digital IQ. Now you could argue that there's some noise in the data because digital IQ is just an indicator for how innovative the organization is as a whole, and I think that would be a fair criticism. Innovative companies as a rule tend to outperform those that aren't innovative. This is a graph showing the upstream traffic source around different URLs. So across the top is the organization, Greenpeace, White House, NASA, Human Rights Campaign, Peace Corps, American Farm Bureau. And these are the top sources of upstream traffic. So the number 4 source of upstream traffic for NASA is Wikipedia. Right? As you would guess, it's almost always Google. Right? Google tends to be the #1 source of upstream traffic. This is important because we're all thinking about how we efficiently drive traffic to our sites and then convert them to some sort of action that adds value to our stakeholders. These green boxes are social media platforms. Just 3 years ago, there wasn't a single green box on this graph. And now for the first time, this was the first time it happened in a study, we have an organization we've registered Facebook as being the #1 upstream referral of traffic. But the ecosystem here, if you will, is starting to be dominated by social media. So just as we're starting to think about almost every organization in this room and every corporate organization now allocates substantial budget and energy to search engine optimization as a means of tapping into that #1 source of referral traffic and increasing it, we're going to start thinking about social media optimization. That is, how do we drive traffic from our social media platforms? The numbers 1 and 2 indicators, forward-looking indicators of who would win an election used to be, are what? If you're just trying to predict in an unemotional, no mercy, no malice way who's going to win an election, what do you look at? Beginning of a race. Money. Money is actually number 2. Anyone know number 1? This is as of last year. Incumbency. Yeah, it's related to this. It's name recognition, which is, I guess, very synonymous with incumbency because everyone in that district would know who you are. But if you were to do a survey and find out who knows these people and who has the most campaign funds, that largely can tell you who is going to win the race. There may be a new #1 indicator, forward-looking indicator of who's going to win a race, and it's 6 and 3 and 1 month out of the election, going onto Facebook and finding out who has the most likes. When we look back at the midterm election, about 76% of the winners in the midterm elections had the most likes 6, 3, and 1 month out. Because it sort of reflects all of that: name recognition, resources, how innovative they are. So what you have here when you think about reaching out to your stakeholders is a transition in the way we think about traditional marketing. And you're all in the business of marketing in some fashion. You might call it donor outreach or stakeholder outreach or advocacy, communicate, whatever the term is, or the heuristic for what we refer to as marketing. You all do it in some format. We're moving as an economy from a rental model to an ownership model. So traditionally, since World War II, the way we communicate with constituency is we find a media outlet that through great editorial voice and consistency of content has it been able to attract this wonderful niche audience, this demographic that we're drawn to, or that we want to communicate with, right? So for all of your organizations, you've identified media outlets that reach this great niche audience. In exchange for that, you pay them to rent this attractive niche. And you say to the Washington Post, I want to reach this people over 80,000 income who are very sensitive about environmental issues, or the Peace Corps reaches out to universities, or whoever it might be, right? And we rent them. Now, with social media, organizations and brands that brand themselves are able to reach out to people and let people opt in and raise their hand and say, I'd be interested in having a direct relationship with the White House. I'd be interested in having a direct relationship with Greenpeace, the Nature Conservancy, the Marines. And I'm interested in hearing almost everything they have to say. And we sort of designed this informal pact where if you send me information, content, utility that adds value to my life, in exchange for that, I'll let you send a certain percentage of content that's more promotional in nature. Right? That is much more powerful than the rental model, and it's turning out to be economically more efficient. So what you have is a lot of organizations, if they're socially media adept, they can, if you will, excise the publisher's tax and move to more of an ownership model versus a rental model. So the majority of you who are charged with outreach beyond your organization in terms of rallying some sort of resource or momentum and groups and stakeholders outside your group are going to begin thinking about how do we develop ownership with these constituencies as opposed to just renting them. You're going to hear this term more and more and more. People talk about earned, owned, rented media. The traditional marketing campaign, you come up with a creative piece, spend some money, test it, hope that it works well, and then go out and really crank it up, right? If you will, traditional marketing is like a bombing campaign. We figure out the target, we look at maps, we plan, we strategize. Maybe we do a trial run, we make sure that this is what we want to cover, and then we take this campaign, if you will, this bomb, and say, okay, the bomb explodes and it works and it covers people and it's effective, and we load up the media vehicle, and then we go out and we carpet bomb, right? And it's actually it's a very efficient, I love war metaphors, I was in trouble with it. It's a very efficient way. Marketing is probably the most efficient part of our organization. There's very few parts of your organization that can touch tens of millions of people with a half a dozen or a dozen people. Marketing is about to get very hard again. It's actually, tracking as an analogy, modern warfare. Marketing is about to go house by house, and it's going to be more hand-to-hand combat. You're going to spend more time and more money on the initial creative, trying to come up with more utility, with ways that add more creative that adds more utility to apps, right? To online programming, to great things, or something that's so creative that it gets forwarded. These technologies, if you will, effectively just give us the opportunity to share things more easily. Whereas when you read a magazine and you see an ad that you really like, there's some people, typically women, baby boomer women, who are prone to ripping it out and sending it to people. Most people don't do that now. Now almost everybody at some point during the day shares something that inspires them or they find it's of real utility. It started out on the internet with jokes. Remember those people who just constantly forward jokes, right? But now it's become more utilitarian. People forward stories. Twitter is basically people just deciding they're just going to share all day long. They're going to go out and curate stuff and they're just going to share it. So the ability to share stuff has gone to just an exponential level. And over the holidays, I'm staying at a nice hotel in the Caribbean. I don't like the way I'm being treated. I find out the headquarters. I find out the name of the guy who runs the company. I email him, and I put a link to who I am on Google, and I put a link to the number of friends I have on Facebook, and I put the next 3 posts I'm about to put out if I don't get back from him. Boom, I start getting treated a lot better, right? Because he realizes I can share my experience at a velocity and at a reach that previously was unimaginable, right? So we're going to spend more time thinking about what is going to inspire people to share, not just raise their level of awareness, not just pound them with here's who we are, here are kind of our 2 or 3 basic associations. But what can we do to really inspire them that's remarkable such that they'll share it? We're still going to salt it with regular media. Traditional media isn't going anywhere. It's not going to disappear. Magazines are going to be around for a long time. Ad-supported TV is going to be around for a long time. It's just not going to be a great place to work or invest, in my view, for the next 10 years. For the students in the room, I think you want to think about, obviously you're back trying to increase the quality of your human capital, and then you have a decision to make around where you're going to allocate your finite human capital, right? The decisions you make about where you're going to work. I would venture that ad-supported media and the industry supporting ad-supported media are going to be really rough places to work in the next 10 years. Because people are shifting to this ownership model, and organizations are shifting to focusing more of their resources on how they can create things where they can get this earned media. And then we hope great creative or great utility in concert with some media spend, and then some of that earned media result in a greater return. There's some truth to the notion that advertising may be the tax that mediocre brands have to pay moving forward, right? Think about passion brands. Think about brands that really get your hormones going, right? Manolo Blahnik, MAC Cosmetics, Ferrari for guys. Great brands that incite a certain level of passion. If you were to take passion brands, if you had on one axis the level of passion that people feel for an organization, and then on another axis the advertising spend, you would see an inverse relationship. Brands that don't inspire that much passion have to advertise to get the word out. Brands that people love and want to become a part of and use it to self-identify have a tendency to share stuff about the organization with people, thereby reducing the need for traditional marketing. Geolocal, how many of you, did anyone check in today? Wow, that's impressive. Hold your hands up again. So the average age here of the people who checked in long was, let's say, 20-something. These new technologies, let me be clear, this is an age thing. Young people tend to get this stuff more than people my generation. It really is an age thing. And it's important that as a manager, most middle managers and senior managers are more my generation. And the reason we've had hopefully some limited success and have been charged with marketing in an organization is that we have a good gut feel for this stuff. Do not make the mistake in this instance around these technologies of extrapolating your own behavior to the larger sample set. I don't get Facebook. I just don't get it. I'm one of those people, and I don't know if any of you have had this experience, where I've heard all the data about Facebook. I'm a marketing professor, so it felt as if I had to get on. Logged on, did the whole thing, and stood there and thought, okay, now what? Nothing happened, right? And I just, how many of you are like me, just do not like Facebook? Anybody do not like it? Okay, hold up your hands again. Average age, older than the people using Foursquare, right? Much older. I'd love the widget, I always say this, I'd love a widget on the top of Facebook that says, there's a reason we have not stayed in touch. Right? I just fundamentally can't figure out the appeal of Facebook. If you're in this business and you're in this room, you've got to figure it out because the data is overwhelming. 70% of America now with a computer connection, right? It's going from 59 to 70 are on Facebook. Affluent Gen Y under the age of 40, 85% of them, again, best crystal ball into tomorrow's leaders and influencers, people doing well professionally under the age of 40, a lot of the people in this room, 85% of them are on Facebook every day. 40% of them watch TV every day. So think about that. Young affluents are twice as likely to have been on Facebook yesterday than to have watched television. 25% of them check it 5 times a day. 20% of them, 1 in 5 of these people, check Facebook before they get out of bed on their phone. Before they roll out of bed, the 80% of them that sleep with their phone next to their bed, grab their phone, and check their Facebook status on their phone before they get out of bed. This was just showing people checked in, over almost 25,000 people, number of people checked in on election day. People are using some of these applications for some really innovative ways to crowdsource ideas. NASA did something interesting around trying to get source ideas for designs for new aircraft. We'll talk more about that later. So our conclusion, and again, we're hammering this home. Digital IQ is going to be the primary driver of stakeholder value over the next 3 years. Not only the primary driver, but the primary point of leakage, right? We looked at number 3 in our ranking was PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and towards the very, very bottom was the Christian Coalition. Remember how relevant, and I'm not from this town, I'm not very politically aware, but I remember seeing the Christian Coalition all over the place about 10 years ago, and I haven't heard anything from them. And it just made sense to me that they are digitally feeble. Whereas I'm consistently hearing about stunts and tactics from PETA and thinking more about, okay, what is it they're doing? Is it worthwhile? Is it relevant? And they are digitally a genius. They have figured out we can't compete. We can't go toe-to-toe with the other organizations fighting for limited mindshare with traditional media. So they are 110% focused on digital, trying to get across their message with those tools. So 7 questions we think you should be asking yourself as a manager in an organization. If you believe digital is the future, what percent of your organization's mission or objective is driven online? Okay. So not only happens online, but is driven online. So for example, a corporate metaphor, the auto industry doesn't, you might think, well, we're the Peace Corps, we don't sign up people online. So, well, okay. You don't necessarily have to consummate the transaction online. The automobile industry is legally prohibited from selling cars online. They entered into these agreements with dealerships that are independently owned that makes it impossible for them to sell cars directly to consumers. What they've done is by adopting these tools early, and the automobile companies, for all the grief they get about being slow, they were very, very aggressive digitally in the 90s, very early, and it got there early. Think about the way you buy a car. Okay? You now go online, you check out brands, you read reviews, you go to blogs, and you go to the automobile manufacturers' websites, you pick the options you want, you build a car with their configurators, which are very sophisticated technology, you price it, find out approximately what the dealership paid for it. So you basically walk into the dealership, the point of purchase. The automobile dealership has been relegated to essentially a point of distribution. It's now really just a warehouse. There's no selling going on in automobile dealerships anymore. You don't go in to pick a car out and look at options. You go in essentially and say, this is what I want, and within a few $100s, I pretty much have a sense for what I should be paying here. You do the same thing in any organization. And that is, even if you don't consummate or deliver the core value or the transaction of your organization, you should be increasingly able to, if you will, consummate the transaction, at least in an emotional or intellectual way, before they actually go to the organization or to the outlet where you consummate the transaction or the activity. If you believe that media consumption is changing, are you changing, or are you clinging to what you're comfortable with? Eisenhower gave this great speech at the end of his presidency talking about the military-industrial complex. And he talked about that because war had to that point been episodic, we could turn factories that were making farm equipment into factories making tanks. And because war was no longer episodic, we needed a regular standing army. And we'd given rise to this 3 million person strong industry that they had become self-directed, if you will, and had breached and seeped into every aspect of government, and were advocating a course of spending on military regardless of the need. I think the same thing has happened in marketing. I'm a part of this complex, by the way. I've made a nice living in marketing by convincing people it's impossible to spend too much money on branding. I can't think of any client I've had since 1992 where I went in and said, spend less money on marketing. I am the end, right? There is a brand industrial complex, ad agencies, direct mail, Google, search engine optimization, that has very strong relationships. The salespeople at the Washington Post and the Washington Times, the incredibly talented digital team at the New York Times, who will convince you, right, the salespeople from Politico, or whoever it might be, that you need to spend more on traditional ad-supported marketing. And what we're encouraging you to do is to take a step back, look at how your consumers are actually behaving, and think, should I really be allocating this much of my finite resources to traditional ad-supported media, or are things changing? When I look at how my constituency is spending their time, and I look at how I'm spending my time in terms of a marketing and media plan, does the music match the words? If you believe that this is a new era of word-of-mouth marketing, it goes back to that notion that it's never been easier to share something. What have you done in your organization that people will talk about? Seth Godin says, what are you doing that's remarkable? Right? NASA is doing remarkable things. NASA had lost almost all relevance in my life, and people started forwarding me pictures, beautiful pictures that were sent back to me from Hubble. Right? Because they were so remarkable. People would forward them. Right? The armed services are doing a great job of doing remarkable things, really innovative, clever, interesting things that people are forwarding. If you believe that user-generated content will overtake traditional media, what are you doing to catalyze and facilitate evangelists? Another corporate analogy. Has anyone heard of Michelle Phan? Anybody? Who's heard of Michelle Phan? Thanks, Maureen. We believe this woman is going to be the Michael Jordan of this decade in terms of how she revolutionizes marketing. She's a 24-year-old Vietnamese American woman who, at the age of 21, started using her iPhone to take videos, create how-to videos of how to apply makeup. So she'll do a video on how to apply makeup for a first date or for prom night. 12 of the 15 most viewed videos on YouTube are how-to makeup videos. Her last video on how to apply makeup to look like Lady Gaga got 23 million views. In the beauty industry, and by the way, she only uses Lancome products. She loves Lancome, this traditional kind of iconic but a little bit dusty brand. She uses some others, but she loves Lancome. Right? Think about the power of this. Lancome will spend $700 million, not Lancome, L'Oreal, who owns Lancome, will spend $700 million domestically on print this year. A page in Glamour, which has a global circulation of 2.1 million, and it's probably about half that, about 1 million people in the U.S., costs $212,000. So to rent a consumer flipping through Glamour with a Lancome ad, hope that you rent them, hope that they get arrested with visual imagery and stop and think about Lancome. That costs $212,000 for one page. Yet 23 million people went online, found Michelle Phan, and watched a video of her describing how to bring this look to life using Lancome for 3 minutes. What's the value of that impression versus this impression? This is globally 2 million. She's getting 23 million views. You're about to see a dramatic shift in the power of celebrity. And Lancome also, or L'Oreal also, has Julia Roberts as a spokesperson. I think Julia Roberts is about to get paid a lot less, and Michelle Phan's about to get paid a lot more. Organizations have great spokespeople, you just haven't met them yet. A big part of our challenge is going to be to figure out a way to find, promote interesting programming and contests such that your Uber users, your evangelists can self-identify, and then you can give them the tools to get out there and spread the good word and be genuinely authentic. Michelle Phan is in a meeting with Lancome, and Lancome says, we love you, we think this is great, we're going to pay you, we're going to give you product. A couple things, we want better lighting, here's some tips on search engine optimization, so more people can find you. And also we noticed that when you're putting on Lancome blush or whatever it is, the tube is half full or the thing is half done. And it's dirty and kind of looks kind of grimy. Anytime you do a shoot, anytime you do anything, we're going to send you all new product. And what was her response? No, why? And by the way, people from our organization can't answer these questions. I think that's a little unfair. Anybody? Yeah. Credibility. Jared?
She loses the authenticity of what she's doing.
That's the word we hear a lot. Gentlemen, introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm a professor at GW.
There you go. Glad you're here. Jared, where are you from?
I'm a student.
Fantastic. Student professor. Authenticity is the word you hear the most. Her response was, but then people wouldn't believe I actually use these products. Right? And it kind of clicked in for everybody around the table. Authenticity is the key. And the people who are actually passionate about your organizations and want to talk about it, there's just a great deal more authenticity. We want to give them the tools such that they can spread the good word about the value of these organizations. If you believe that Facebook is becoming as important as search, how do your social media optimization efforts stack up against your search engine optimization efforts? Again, more traffic coming from your social media platforms, Google. Are you fostering a digital culture? This is a big one. A lot of this is not as much as a resource question as about just changing the cultural mindset of an organization. One fast follower. It's been shown, and Peter Golder, another colleague of Doug and mine at NYU Stern, who's now at Dartmouth Tuck School, does a lot of work around innovation. What he's found is that the organizations on the bleeding edge don't have the greatest return on invested capital to their stakeholders. The companies that have the greatest return are the fast followers. The companies that look at NASA and say, what are they doing that's really successful and working really well? And then they extend that program to their brand. Right? Some people call it IP theft, and consulting we call it benchmarking. Find another program across all industries that's going really well, and think, what would be our spin on that? How could we do that? Ready, fire, aim. I think the prestige industry is a lot like the government sector, and that is the traditional cadence of marketing is ready, aim, check with legal, aim, fire. The organizations that are most successful online have a ready, fire, aim attitude. Right? I always say, and I encourage my people to do this in our organization, and I'm trying to infuse this in the organization in Stern. This is a medium that rewards asking for forgiveness, not for permission. Barriers of exit around digital are lower than anything you've ever done. If you build a store, a recruitment center, go out with a print ad, those are expensive decisions that are not easy to take back. You put a program up or an app up or do something online, if it doesn't work or it embarrasses the brand, it's pretty easy to kill it within minutes and take it down. The barriers of exit here are lower. It's also a medium that rewards failure and iteration. Fail, learn, change, relaunch, restart, measure, iterate. The government sector tends to take sort of a weapons procurement approach to the internet, and that is they create these laundry lists of everything they want to do online, and they start creating this aircraft carrier. And then they do all this stuff, the development times of months, if not years, and then they launch the aircraft carrier. This is not that way at all. You get something into the water, and start tweaking it every day and see what works and what doesn't. Less art, more science. All about metrics and not all. A lot of analytics and metrics. What's working, what isn't, how are people converting, how are they behaving online, attribution. And then finally, if you believe no clear leader has evolved or has emerged in your sector, the basic question, why should it be you? I serve on a lot of corporate boards, and I always say, why should we win? What is it we do that's different? Why should we win?